world of 1916 was complex. Well, the world of 1945 was complex. The world of 2016 is intensely complex. You'll be dealing with terrorists. You'll be dealing with hybrid armies. You'll be dealing with little green men. You're going to be dealing with tribes. You'll be dealing with national leaders and local leaders. You'll be dealing with politics and economics. And you'll be dealing with direct fire and indirect fire. And you're going to be dealing with it all. And it's all going to be dealt with simultaneously.
Club, 11/21/2016, Scott Hensler. Again, for the new listeners that have been joining over the past couple of weeks, to identify myself, I am what's referred to as an exorcist or deliverance minister. That's really the way that I prefer to see it. And so for the past 16 years, now going on 17 years, I have been dealing with casting out demons, setting the captives free, and breaking curses and doing all kinds of things that have to do with the supernatural, otherwise the direct involvement with demons and how they terrorize. Now, I also want everyone to understand that there is a connection with what is referred to as grays, what is referred to as reptilians, the fallen angels, all the things that basically have been tormenting and terrorizing, the world in itself, is all connected together. Now, what I want to do is I want to tie that all together and a little bit with the shows that are going to be coming up here. So I'm going to be doing 4 shows on Montauk. And, of course, tonight's the introduction. But what I want to do is I want to piece everything together all the way to CERN, what's happening now, the technology that came out of Montauk, the technology that came out of the Philadelphia experiment, the technology that is being used now for mind control, everything that has been implemented on society, on the U.S. citizens and the people of this world, is an abomination. And this is unacceptable. And so the more that we expose, the more that I bring to the knowledge and understanding of those people who are affected by it, the targeted individuals. Last week, of course, I did the show, The Nature of Gang Stalkers. And so with the knowledge of demons, the understanding of what they're doing today, I think I've got a fairly good handle on what's going on. Now, there's always more to it. That's why we continue in our research. That's why I continue in the broadcast. The more and more I deal with people who are infected with demons, the people who are TI'd, targeted individuals, the combination of the two, the more I learn. And there was no question there is a connection. And in that connection is tyranny against the average individual. Now, I'm located in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and my main website is scotthensler.org. Now, Scott Hensler Network is the name of my organization. It is the corporate or the LLC that I'm tied to, that owns Tinfoil Hat Club, that owns a few other things, that has done the past shows with Scott Hensler Network on Blog Talk, tied to the YouTube videos, tied to authoring Second Heaven Invasion, Hoodoo Voodoo, BPD for Borderline Personality Disorder, or Jezebel. The past books available at Kindle, Hoodoo Voodoo available through me as a hard copy. And again, with the deliverances I do over the phone, and by the way, I am behind. I had a walk-in this weekend I was not expecting, so I got behind on my calls, plus the research of this project for Montauk and then just the normal. So if I was going to get to you and I didn't, I apologize. Things come up. It's hard to make a schedule because if I have to do a deliverance, sometimes it can take a long time. You know, it's not like a doctor's appointment, and so I just have to fly by the seat of my pants, so to speak, all right? So tonight on Montauk, the introduction tonight, all I'm going to try and do is establish an understanding. Now, many of you already know about Montauk. Many of you already done research. You may know more than me. Okay, but what I want to do tonight is lay it out for the average individual who really doesn't know. And I want to start putting things together to show the avenues that this technology, the avenues that this project manifested into today. So times and dates, names of people, you know, they may vary, they may change. Even the whole concept of Montauk, along with the Philadelphia, what really took place, whether it really was a time wave, an interlocked that took place with another experiment that caused it to go out of control, or whether it was, you know, alien interference. Whatever way you want to look at it, I'm just going to base it on the gentleman that right now is one of the main key people who have brought this forth, and so I'm just going to go along with what they've got. I've been listening and studying and reading and dealing with them for some time. In fact, one of the gentlemen I think I met in Phoenix, and then I just recently found out that he was in Phoenix at the same time I was there. So very possible. So the show's going to be split up into fours: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We'll take off for Thursday, and I'll finish out on Friday for CERN. So before I continue, again, I want to thank everyone for supporting the ministry. Again, you know, what I do is I pray for people, I cast out their demons, I break their curses, as well as do this show. So I'm a very busy individual, and anything that anyone can do to help me has been instrumental in setting people free. I've got a good track record. The people that I've been involved with in the past have a good track record, and so we have made a difference for many, many lives. And again, I've been doing this for now my 16th year, so I'll be starting 17 years here pretty soon. Now, it's interesting, Sunday, yesterday, when I was in a public setting, I was gang stalked. Now, it's interesting that happened because it hasn't happened in a long time. I mentioned a couple of the cases that did take place for me, but all of a sudden I find myself in this. But I also noticed that while this was taking place, that the tinnitus, the cyclotronics, the high-frequency pitch that had been in my mind for some time now, as I've been talking about, was switched off. And I felt a peace I hadn't felt in a long time, and next thing I know, I'm dealing with an individual who had a goal in mind, and that was to upset me. That was to throw me off track. That was to irritate me, to harass me, to gang stalk me. Now, this individual was a very large man. I'm older. I'm 60 now, and I get confused on how old people are. I think they're older than me and they're younger, you know. And so he may have been younger than me, but he definitely was up there. And he weighed probably about 300 pounds. I'm going to guess 6'2" and above. And he made himself known, blocking the aisle that I needed to go through, basically covering everything so I could not go one way or another, and then just stared at me. Now, it takes a lot to rattle my cage. I mean, I roll up my sleeves and I knock heads around all day long, called demons. And so this guy's nothing as far as I'm concerned, and I just looked him straight in the eye. Absolutely no emotions, no feelings, and I looked as much as I could into his eyes to see what spirits, because every time I deal with people who have demons, and I can guarantee you, as I talked about, that those who are doing the gang stalking are loaded with demons. And so there's a phenomenon that takes place I call looky-looks, meaning that since the eyes are the windows of the soul, the direct contact, you know, the optic nerve into the brain, and the battle's in the mind, then the demons that are in the individual look through the person's eyes at me. That's very typical. I see it all the time. And so as I look back at them, again, showing no fear and being in Christ, again, for those who listen who do not believe in Jesus Christ, I wouldn't do this if I didn't have the blood covering that I have. I wouldn't even think about doing this if I didn't believe in Him. All right, so in this understanding, in this battle, in this spirit realm, as I spiritually warfare, otherwise standing no fear, 2 Timothy 1:7, I have not been given a spirit of fear, but a power and love and a sound mind. Again, not showing hate, not showing anything other than, talk to the hand. Little yawn here and there, because this is nothing. So in that, with the demons then understanding that they've met their match, this man with his rear end on fire left the building. And that's exactly the way it should be, ladies and gentlemen. This is what I'm trying to get everyone to understand, that when you resist the devil, he will flee. Okay? And so those who profess to be in Christ that do not understand this, then that's why you're getting knocked around. Now, I told you last Friday, that I had an individual who then brandished a weapon while I was in the gym. It was still holstered, but removing a weapon while you're in the locker room is absolutely absurd. It shows an intent, and again, no fear. Okay, and with that, they're not accomplishing what they set out to do. And as I talked about, the cell phone connection to their mind, to their brain, the dopamines, the satisfaction, and or the punishment for not completing their task obviously took place with them. So there you go. So again, just understand who you are and do not tolerate it. All right. Now, Montauk. Now, Montauk, we hear about projects. We hear about Manhattan. We hear about Philadelphia. We hear about MK Ultra. Project Paperclip. We hear about all these things, but Montauk in itself is actually a location. It's on Long Island on the very eastern tip, known very well as a wildlife refuge. Basically, it was founded in 1660. Okay, so it's up in that New York area. I've been on Long Island. It is a very beautiful place, and I can just imagine, I haven't been to this spot, but I can imagine how beautiful it is. It was also, since it was a strategic military establishment, was referred to as Camp Hero, and also part of radar that was established there, and I'll get into that in a minute. But originally was referred to as Fort Hero, and since it was able to overlook the bay and the areas that surrounded New Jersey, New York, and so forth, or I should say on that Upper Peninsula, that they had 16-inch guns there. All right, so it was a major stronghold in case of any attacks from the enemy of all types. So I just want everyone to understand that it is a actual location as well as, quote, a project. All right, now other names have come out of that, and again, I'll get into that. Now, again, as I mentioned, by the way, this was the Montauk Indians, if I'm pronouncing it right. I found several different pronunciations of it. That's basically where the name came from. Many parts of the country are named after Indians, and so that's how that was done. So, again, basing on what I'm going to be saying here, Preston Nichols, Duncan Cameron, Al Bill, okay, these individuals had come forth later who were on the project, who discussed their involvement, discussed what happened, discussed what they had done, what they had seen, even their participation in time travel, participation even in mind control for what's referred to as the Monarch or the Montauk Boys. And I'm going to save that for another show. So again, with what I'm bringing here, I'm just trying to go over things. Okay. Now, Jack Pruitt was basically in charge of this area when it was turned into a mind control and for the Philadelphia experiment of causing items to disappear. The invisibility, the stealth operation of ships, planes, or whatever they wanted to do was basically the main idea behind this. And of course, we know it as the Philadelphia experiment that went awry. And as I talk about this, most of this information, again, came from these gentlemen. All right. Now, as I mentioned, Al Bielek, I possibly knew him. I certainly recognized him when I saw that he was in the Phoenix area in the same time frame I was, which I believe had to do with Motorola, or some of the sub companies involved with it. Possibly, I don't know. I just you think you know somebody, there you go. And like I say, I actually had the chance to meet a lot of the engineers that had to do with the Apollo projects out of Motorola, the government division, had to do, with the Iridium system, cell phone technologies, other troop recognition devices, all kinds of things that I'm not directly involved with, but had relationships with them through Amateur Radio Club. We're all techies, we're all hams, we would have the stories, go for coffee, talk about this, talk about that. It was an exciting time for me back in the 80s and the 90s. Now, going backwards, von Neumann was head of research, and Jack Pruitt was the one in charge, basically the strategics of it, but Neumann was the head research scientist. Now, he evolved out of Nikola Tesla, which also was involving Albert Einstein, also involving Eisenhower and Roosevelt back when the projects were brought up. The CIA was directly involved. Now, the Stanford Turner, basically the CIA director, was called to the carpet on this. Senator Barry Goldwater, who was the senator of Arizona, who was my inspiration for technology and ham radio when I was growing up, being part of the looking into and exposing the mind control operations. Congress, the House, the Senate, none of these guys at that time in history were going to go along with it. So there was a great effort to shut it down. Now, it did continue because we see in the 90s that President Clinton, discussing MK Ultra, which was part of this, and I'll tie that in, apologized for the harm that was done to the people. But it never did stop. It has never stopped. It's continued. If anything, it has amplified. It has escalated. It is at an all-time high. So just understand that everything that I'm talking about here, when they wiped the slate clean, supposedly, everything went underground into the black ops, black hole projects. Now, before the 60s, going through into the 70s and 80s, the Montauk Project had been there. Now, Fort Hero, Montauk, actually at one time was a major radar installation called SAGE. This was a very high-powered radar. Cold War, making sure that nothing came over from the east, nothing came up from the north, and it eventually was shut down when satellites, when other technologies were brought on. Using high-powered radar wasn't the best of things, anyways, because there was other technologies that the enemy came along with that this now was obsolete. So the whole place was completely shut down. And about the 60s or so, and then as they came in with introducing some of this technology, they brought it back in as the Phoenix Project. Back it was also referred to as Red Hawk, Rainbow. All these different names are all tied into Montauk. So whenever you hear these, there's some association, but they're different parts of the project and at different times. That's really what it all amounts to. Now, when they got out of there and basically left everything behind, the SAGE radar, the buildings, all the supporting buildings, everything that had to do with that base was basically left behind. So all the buildings were standing, everything was in place. So it was right for the pick'em when they wanted to restart these projects back up, and that is exactly what they did. So again, the Montauk Project, at being Red Hawk originally, then turning to Phoenix and Phoenix 1, Phoenix 2, again with the implementation of the Philadelphia experiment. Do not confuse the Manhattan projects. some of you that may have done your research and you hear this and you hear that, you may be confusing that. Manhattan was a completely separate project that had to do with the atomic bomb during World War II. Now, by the way, the Philadelphia always taking place in that time, and I'll talk about the dates here in a minute. But anyways, the Manhattan Project, the atomic bomb for Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the bombing of them is what that was all about. But to understand that as I go through this and talk about how Montauk was shut down, at least the surface was, that many of these scientists were actually sent over to the Manhattan Project, and then even when these were going on, there was an exchange, because by the time Montauk shut down, the Manhattan was at its peak, okay? All right, now starting in Chicago around 1930, and even a little bit before, the University of Chicago, with Dr. Hookerson and Nikola Tesla and a few others, basically were working on the theorizing of invisibility, of cloaking, of being able to hide an object, whether it's a ship, a plane, a human being, or whatever. Now, in 1933, the Institute of Advanced Technology was established, and as that was established, then this program was moved to Princeton, okay, being up there in the New Jersey area. So that was finally taking hold about 1934. And by this time, there were some big names that had come in. Of course, Tesla was absolutely a main player, but there was a lot of mathematicians that came along to add to this, okay? So again, when the project was moved, it was noted as the Philadelphia experiment being across from the Delaware River at the naval base, okay, of the Philadelphia Naval Base, which was basically within the city limits. So the Delaware, as it runs up through there, separating Pennsylvania, separating New Jersey, and as you go up a little further into New York, then you get into the Manhattan, you get into other parts of New York, and so they're all tied together. So in a very short period of time, a vessel can move from one place to another. And since the Navy yards had their bases already established along there, this is why this was chosen, along with Princeton itself, right? Now, when Albert Einstein joined, he also was joined in with a man by von Neumann. Okay, Tesla was named the project director of this particular project, and Neumann was his assistant. Now, obviously, Tesla was a very advanced electrical radio engineer. He had the original patent on the electric AC motor. He had the patent on the oscillator, which we know, eventually being converted into the spark gap generator for telegraph. All SOSs were sent on that, back in the day. Any ship that went down, sending help, save our ship, it actually means something else. But the whole point of it is the oscillator circuit, the tune circuit, the resonator, those things capable of then transmitting radio waves through the air, Tesla had main patents on. Now, Tesla was also a main engineer for RCA, and I want you to understand that RCA was spun off from General Electric. Okay, now Edison was the founder of General Electric, and the financing between the Rockefellers and some of the others, there were disputes, there were problems. These gentlemen didn't get along with each other. But when the United States government came in, trying to take monopolies and split them up, General Electric had become such a large conglomerate that they forced it to fracture off. Now, whether that was the true case or not, my feeling is what they really wanted to do was take RCA and use it for more advanced technologies, RCA being the Radio Corporation of America. Many of the police radios, along with Motorola, were instrumental in getting two-way radios into police cars and ambulances and so forth. So the information that comes from RCA, basically we're talking about Tesla. When it comes out of General Electric, we're basically talking about Thomas Edison. All right. Now Thomas Edison was big in DC, Tesla was the main pusher for AC, and there was a big fight over that. But in either case, RCA then was also part of this. Some other companies, as I get into it, were in this, being a project that was being funded, with the Pentagon, the war effort, those things that Congress even, didn't want to do. There were private funds brought into it at different times to continue this. And so we even have that today with the Rothschilds, the banking, this black hole that basically they pour money into that no one ever sees, and it runs into the billions, if not trillions of dollars for technology that is literally heading towards the beast system, or is the beast system that we will be dealing with today. So I want you to understand that everything that I'm discussing here is 1, 2, 3 ABC, one step after another to what we're dealing with, and that's why I'm bringing this up. So as they continued, RCA breaking off and then getting with Tesla, being brought into the military, being brought into this project, they eventually did have success, and by 1938 they were able to make small objects and even a small ship disappear. Okay, now this was in the Brooklyn Navy Yard, and this did not involve humans at all. These were simply physical objects, had nothing to do with individuals. Now, the Brooklyn Navy Yard in New York basically was part of the East River, breaking off from there. So understand, too, that in the same time, that in parallel, I don't know if you're familiar with degaussing, some say degaussing, but degaussing of an item, meaning that if something becomes magnetized like a ship, because we know that iron makes steel, steel can become magnetized, the radios, the radar, anything that they had under along with the salt water would cause the ships to become magnetic. Well, that was a problem because in World War II and even part of World War I, mines were attracted to magnetics. And so any time a magnetic field then was sensed by the mine, it would go off. So this is how the enemy basically was taking our ships out, along with the wolf pack of the submarines. But the degaussing operations, meaning that they would take the ships and degauss them to cause them not to be magnetized. So the technology that was being involved for the Philadelphia was also part of what was the degaussing because of the amount of energy, the electromagnetic waves that would be produced from it. And so even though the two projects were running in parallel, they didn't have anything to do with each other than an exchange of technology so one could accomplish what they were trying to do. All right? Now, from this, their success that they were able to accomplish, taking it to one more step forward in the theory with Hilbert's space and Einstein's relativity, they were able to take a quantum mechanics leap through into magnetic control with the ability now to bring an infinite connection to dimensions that could be accessed. So meaning, basically, I talk about the second heaven, I talk about the spirit realm, I talk about interdimensional. Well, they were achieving it then. Okay, so you can imagine what they have today. So if anyone thinks that this stuff is absurd and you can't get there, this is old hat now. Look how many years ago this was. And now we have advancements, which again, this whole show is going to be connecting to CERN. And so with the, quantum computing, quantum theories, along with Tesla's transmitters, Dr. Levine also with, the quantitative calculations and able to bring time and space. All of these guys were instrumental in being able to do what they did. And so by 1941, because the war had finally taken hold and we were in it, that the war effort then really hurled this project forward. Okay, until then it was a what if and what we could do with this, and now it was a potential life and death, because we need to remember that the Nazi war machine was very advanced. Okay, Now, the wolf packs, being the submarines, they were causing havoc on all nations, Britain, United States, anyone that was trying to be an ally. They would go in literally and wipe out the cargo ships, and if you don't get the supplies, you can't fight. If you don't get the supplies, you don't eat. You don't get the supplies, you can't load your gun, or you don't have a gun. So this was a massive effort to try and stop that, because they were getting, Germany was getting the upper hand, and it was looking pretty bad. And you got to remember, we were on two fronts too. Okay, by this time, the Japanese had attacked. And by the way, there's information that some of the scientists that were actually at Pearl Harbor were removed just days prior to the attack, because they needed them on these projects, and they knew Pearl Harbor was going to be attacked. So Pearl Harbor was allowed to be bombed to bring us into the war. So again, one of the things I want to point out is how our U.S. government thinks, how they're willing to sacrifice the lives of citizens in our military to achieve their own goal. That's a crime. And all these people need to be brought to justice. Okay? All right, so with the need of having, to have stealth ships was at an all-time high because of the Nazi wolf packs and basically any other vessels that they were engaging with along with the Japanese, that this was a time that something needed to be done. Okay, so then Tesla was given a full cooperation, given full supplies and full manpower to do whatever it took to make ships disappear. Now, at a minimal, they wanted to be at least radar invisible. If they could be optically invisible, that was a plus. Now, basically, both were achieved. Okay, whenever, if you're familiar with radar, that's a radio signal that goes out. When it hits something solid, it'll bounce back, and it's in that retrieving signal that something is out there, like sonar. Sonar being an audio, the pulse of the tone going out, going through the water and coming back. They time how long something goes out, how long it comes back, and they know the distance, okay? Now, the main problem here was that Tesla understood that human flesh and steel and wood, plastic, whatever, was all different. And he was very, very concerned that human tissue, under the intense amount of electromagnetic energy at radio frequencies, okay, by the way, a lot of this was done around 400 megahertz, and that was quite an achievement for even in that day. So Tesla was arguing with the military that he did not want to use soldiers. He did not want to use Navy personnel. He did not want to use sailors. And not at this point in time. Now, there's even information that since Tesla was so far advanced with his technology that he was actually communicating with extraterrestrials. Now, the Nazis were communicating with extraterrestrials. We have information on that. And so a lot of the information that Tesla was being given, that there was a problem in the way that they were making the equipment, the way the frequencies, the frequency shift, the phase, everything involved, there was going to be a problem with humans. Okay, it may work with solid objects such as ships, but when you put humans into it, it's a different thing. Okay? Now, they did finally go to a point of using a larger ship, okay, and in this, Tesla was successful, okay, in causing a ship to completely disappear around 1942. Now, with the understanding that if he was to continue in this, that he would be involved in using humans. And so von Neumann, basically, him and those two didn't get along with each other, even though they had respect for each other. You can imagine two very ingenious people having the problem of trying to work in the same kitchen. Eventually, Tesla threw up his hands. He didn't want to involve people, and regardless of the success that they were able to do, he wanted out, and so he did. And von Neumann continued. Okay, and there's even information that Tesla may have sabotaged the equipment before he left, not necessarily physically breaking it, but causing the devices to be untuned, to be out of tuned, to not be in resonant, to not be in phase, to whatever that, however they did it. So it took a while for von Neumann to finally get that all figured out. Okay, so he was able to overcome all of that, and again, he, wanting to move forward, had asked for the next ship to be manned. Okay, and they did. And so what they did is they brought in the USS DE-173. Now, DE is Destroyer Escort. My father was on a Destroyer Escort in the war. It was a little bit later. And so a Destroyer Escort also has some guns, has machine shops, has the ability to repair destroyers, has the ability to carry food and supplies and medical and all kinds of things. So when they say escort, one, it helps defend the ship, but it also is full of supplies. So the ship's hulls had lots of room, and that room was perfect for putting in the equipment for modification of all the onboard Tesla coils, generators, everything necessary, the antennas, whatever it took to equip this ship to function in their stealth mode. This is the one that they picked. Okay, you know it as the Aldrich. All right. So they put all the men on there, and everything went perfect. However, all the crew was disoriented. They were sick, and they had physical problems. Okay, this was very concerning, and so they made some efforts. Now, you got to remember, Tesla was off the project by now, and he was warned by the extraterrestrials that this would be a problem because there were things that needed to be done that hadn't been done yet in order to keep people from feeling the effects of this high-powered radio. And so that was not done. Von Neumann did not have this technology, and so he tried the best that he could to make these changes, and even though he made the changes, he still knew himself that it wasn't complete, but they were under the gun because of the war effort. Okay? So they did the best they could with what they had. All right, now there's some discrepancies on to when the final project, when the Manhattan Project went awry with the Aldrich. Some say August 12th, some say October 28th. I don't know. Whatever the case is, history is definitely telling us that something happened and something went wrong. But in either case, they went along with this. Okay, they went ahead and did this. Okay. Now, they, at this point, thinking that if they could lower the power and only get the ship to be radar invisible instead of optically invisible, then maybe that was one of the answers to not getting the crew sick, disoriented. If you've ever had, that kind of sickness from loud noises, RF radio, I used to work with it. It's amazing what it can do to you. Vertigo, all of these problems, they thought that would stop. Well, they went ahead and did that, and sure enough, it worked. The ship didn't completely disappear, but it went off radar. But something about, a minute or so into this test, as they were confirming that it was working, then something went haywire, and the ship completely disappeared. There was, from what the understanding is, there was a blue flash, boom, it was gone, and it was very disturbing for everybody because it was never their intent to do that. Now, depending on the information that you look up, some say several hours, some say 24 hours. The first time around might have been 3 hours. Now it's, over 24. But in either case, the ship came back a little later, about 24 hours later. Now, this was in the Philadelphia harbor. So, again, this is why the Philadelphia experiment name. Okay, so when it reappeared 24 hours later, out of the crew, 40 were dead. Okay, 120 were lost. There were reports that men were actually in the hull and the bulkheads and the floors, floating, still disappearing, still, basically evaporating before our very eyes. Okay, basically leaving 21, still alive, but some of them died even shortly after. And my understanding, too, is that most of them, with the mental issues, it didn't go well with them. All right. Now, with these claims, and with the information that we've gotten from those that were even involved in it, if you saw the movie, you'll see that two people jumped, two associates that were the ones who actually ran the equipment, jumped overboard and went into a vortex. The movie portrays it that the gentlemen that I talked about, their names earlier, claim to be brothers, claim to be the two that happened to. They were actually brought to the Montauk Project 40 years later. This is their claims. This is the information. Other than understanding what came out of it, that's the only confirmation that I can have. But this is their story, and they're sticking to it. And Al is already dead. He's not with us anymore. So all we can do is rely on the history that they were able to give us. All right. Now, others will claim that what happened with the ship and the circumstances was that the aliens that were actually in cooperation, because at that time there were two recognition of aliens, one that had gone with the United States, the other group America had rejected, and they went to Nazi Germany and actually were in cahoots with them. Whatever that case was, however this went down, it was a disaster. Whatever the circumstances were, people died, people were lost in the spirit realm. People, basically, their lives were completely destroyed. Now, in this, there was then such a concern about what happened that there were experiments taking place on Montauk at the same time, again, 40 years later, that in the phase shift of 20 years, that with the two projects taking place at the same time and then entering into the dimensions, that there may have been a phase lock, there may have been a ripple, there may have been something that tied the two together, because at Montauk and these later years, in '84 I believe it was, that their experiment went awry and they couldn't shut it down either, and I'll talk more about that later. Again, I just want to point out what's going on here. Now, with the description of the two potentials taking place at the same time in the dimensions of the Philadelphia and Montauk, that with the ripple effect that could take place, coming together, otherwise two forces coming together, that the amount of damage that could have been done to this Earth literally scared the bejeebies out of the scientists. And since this had gone, so badly, that they decided to shut it down. And so it was. Now, whether it was, again, any part of the biorhythm of the Earth that they talk about, the paradigm of locking the two transmitters at Montauk and Philadelphia together at the same time, whatever it was enough for them to cause to shut it down. And this also, because what took place at Montauk, they shut it down too in '84. So we just need to understand that, when we were dealing with the atomic bomb, and before they detonated it, we need to understand at the Manhattan Project that they had calculated that the atomic bomb was capable or potentially capable of igniting the atmosphere in the world. So with the testing of the bomb, they were prepared to allow man to be destroyed. Okay, so scientists are a threat, scientists are mad, scientists are demon-possessed, scientists are, duressed, being held, forced to do whatever they want. Whatever the case is, for mankind in itself, this is not a good situation. Okay? Now, after that project was shut down, Van Neumann was sent to the Manhattan Project. Again, it was in full swing at that time. The Aldrich was put back as a regular destroyer escort, got its full service, and went back into the war. Okay. Now, then going into the shows that will be coming up here, several things were realized out of this. Okay, even though it was abandoned, even though that it was put down, we need to understand that the labs that were supporting this, Princeton University, some others that were established, they continued in a smaller scale to do this. And it wasn't until they recommissioned Montauk later, because you got to remember this, when I talk about what took place during World War II and what took place during Montauk for, the Montauk boys, the Montauk chair, the programming, UFOs, all of that stuff, that was a later time, two separate instances. And again, with the commissioning of the Phoenix Projects, Phoenix Project 1 and 2, again, basically coming out from the Philadelphia. So when this was all shut down, everything basically was abandoned to the public, to Congress, to the President. But you need to remember that when the wars ended, there was also a massive influx called Project Paperclip, where they brought in Nazi scientists, okay? So in this realization, time and space could be manipulated. Humans could be affected both mentally and physically by radio waves, okay? And then again, with this known, they didn't want to give it up. So the experiments continued in the labs until they got to a point that the funding is always necessary if you're going to do anything in a large scale. And so at this time, these secret projects were funded by private parties. ITT, okay, and I'm Sperry. We're talking about, again, RCA. We're talking about other companies who also, by the way, were German-owned, because when the war came along, that split them up, and then when the war was over, everything resumed again, and these gentlemen that owned these companies, by the way, the Rockefellers sat on the board on some of these companies that black funded, the project here. Okay, so now at the end of the war, all the changes that took place, the OSS splitting into the CIA, also from there the NSA, the Pentagon going back to black hole projects, and out of that comes the UFO issues that we had, alien encounters, the abductions, the Cold War issues, Project Paperclip, as I mentioned, with the Nazi scientist, an exchange that took place, MK Ultra, okay, NASA, okay, von Braun, him as the engineer, LSD, okay, drugs exploded basically after that, okay, Project Chatter, Project Bluebird, Project Artichoke, MK Delta, MK Mind Control, Monarch, okay, all the Monarch mind control projects, okay. Joseph Mengele, was a Nazi psychiatrist, scientist. He was brought on board. Now, he was the monster of Auschwitz, and so now we've got this guy funding him and bringing him into a world that is virtually not good for U.S. citizens. And as I get into this with Montauk boys and what's been taking place all along, again, the people that are doing this are absolute monsters. So now with Tesla's technology, Nazi scientists with mind control, the birthing of psychotronics has been basically unleashed onto the American people and to those of the world. Okay? So all the buildings, everything that was at Montauk, as I go through this, as we look at it now, those facilities have been shut down. They've been abandoned, but there's information that there were bases established under Montauk. Okay, and there's two different Montauk monsters that I'm going to be talking about, some that have washed up on shore, one that manifested during one of the experiments, That was part of what caused them to shut it down. Okay, so the basic facility being remote on that tip has been turned back to a park. Okay, the radar's still there, the buildings are still there, but everything's been gutted out. Okay, now the underground facilities, there's no reason, as large and as complex as they were, I doubt very seriously that they've been shut down. And in fact, Tory, the gentleman who's no longer with us, that passed away a few months ago, that was doing all the videos, he was being teleported to Montauk. He was one of the, now whether he was one of the Montauk boys or not, I don't know, but the information that he was giving out, his experiences go right along with the MK Ultra, with the time travel, teleportation, and all the basic, all the sick, horrible things that these people have been doing to kids, have been doing to adults. And again, I want to save most of this for the coming shows, but again, this is just all continuing. Okay, public mind control. Okay, now with that is the remote viewing. All right, now if you're not familiar with remote viewing, you need to understand that people who are classified as psychic, okay, and I'm going to talk more about that because there's spirit issues. Now, whenever you bring people in with this that haven't been through deliverance, then though they may have the abilities because of the third eye being opened up, there's also a demonic spirit realm aspect. So again, these projects, whether we want to call them grays, whether we want to call them hybrids, whether we want to call them fallen angels and demons, the point of it is that they're all in cooperation together. Okay? So now we have a complete exchange of alien technology, an exchange of human work, resources being exchanged back and forth, that all, again, coming out of the Montauk, coming out of the Philadelphia, coming out of MK Ultra, coming out of Nazi Germany, all of the stuff we're dealing with, this supposable U.S. government is very much involved with it. Those people who claim to be our presidents, like Obama, going back to the Bushes, going back to Johnson, going back to all these guys, believe me, they've been in agreement with all this all along. And so the nature of the beast system has been established and put in place. Now, one of the things about Montauk and the radar installation that they reused there, and as I talk about that later, that was all high-powered. We need to understand now, with technology of cell phone towers being implemented all over the country, they don't need necessarily high-powered central points to do mind control. But at that point in time, when they were doing the research with the Montauk chair, that, by the way, the X-Men, if you've ever watched the movie, the guy that's in the wheelchair, the leader of that particular group, he would go into a room called Cerebro, and basically, in my opinion, that was the Montauk chair. And so he could eventually go in anywhere that he wanted to. He could listen to anybody. Basically, it was a remote viewing. And I believe the movie was based on that, of the Montauk chair. And again, as I discuss more about this, if you're not familiar with any of it, it's a pretty frightening situation. Okay? So these projects absolutely affect mankind. Again, bringing us into the beast system. The high-powered radio waves can still be done, especially with satellites. The increase of abducted children, again, the Montauk boys is going to be one of the main subjects. But, in '99, did you know there was literally 800,000 children missing in the United States? Right now, we're averaging about 250,000. And so the Montauk boys were known to be kids who were kidnapped from all over, some of them looking for specific genetics, but a lot of them were just grabbing any kid they could, runaways, basically, kids that were in trouble, just whatever it took to get kids in to run these experiments was just a horrible thing. And by the way, there's been one individual that has even confessed to this, okay? So in either place, time travel, interdimensional, massive mind control, the ability to cause things to materialize, such as creatures, aliens from another dimension, basically opening the veil, and again pointing towards CERN, which again I've talked about. CERN basically is a controlled nuclear detonation, because when they were doing the Manhattan Project, if there's any connection to the Montauk, is the fact that the veil was breached, that things could come and go. And during the atomic explosions, that while they were in the Montauk chair, that a different realm, see there's the parallels, there's potentially 7 parallel realms at the same time. We're talking about dimensions up to 11 and 12 and further. All of this stuff was then realized by this technology. So tomorrow, I want to get more into the mind control in itself. Wednesday is when I'll talk about the Montauk boys, okay? All right, and again, I'll try and include a little more about Tori. And Thursday, of course, we'll have that off for Thanksgiving, and I'll finish out on Friday with CERN. And again, I want to thank everyone, and I hope I'm making sense here. I have to really work hard at selecting what information to give out. I mean, if I were to just give out everything, this would be hours and hours and hours, and I don't want to bore you. I just want to give you an idea of what's going on. I'm trying to make these connections. I'm trying to get you to understand that evil does what evil is, and so we have a tyrant, evil government that literally sees us as guinea pigs, and that literally millions of children have perished. There's information now coming out with the abduction of children, the sex slavery, connecting the Clintons, connecting the heads of state. We've been talking about this for a long time, and I can guarantee you there's a road that leads all the way back to Montauk and continues, all right? So again, I'm behind on my calls, and I apologize. I'll try to do what I can to catch up. But again, I just want everyone to understand that this week I'm focusing on Montauk and the technology used today that came from there. And again, the surface facility that you see has been abandoned. So the underground facility is what I'll be touching on as well that has to do with this. So there you go. If you always wondered what Montauk was about, or if you already knew and I gave a little more, I hope I've helped out. But just understand that this stuff is really happening. Psychotronics are really happening. Gang stalking is really happening. Again, as I mentioned, I dealt with it on Sunday, and it's going to escalate. And so the mind control, the electronics, the ability to cloak, the ability to travel in time, the ability to make something materialize, even the transporting of children, even the transporting of one person to be used in a ceremonial sacrifice, bloodletting, whether they're eaten up by the reptilians or whatever the case is. It's one of the reasons that these kids disappear the way they do and they're never seen again. The satellites can lock onto them, and just like something out of Star Trek, they disappear. And this stuff's real. So this is one of the reasons that, again, if you are not a believer in Jesus Christ, to believe. Because, again, the only reason I'm able to achieve anything here is because of the blood of Christ. And without Him, I wouldn't even think of doing this. So just please understand what this is all about. All right, God bless everyone, and we will see you tomorrow night for the mind control on Montauk.